Welcome to the Bladder Cancer Canada podcast. I'm your host, Summer Stewart, volunteer with Bladder Cancer Canada. As the first and only Canadian patient advocacy organization dedicated to bladder cancer issues, Bladder Cancer Canada is proud to provide patients, their caregivers, and families with the support and resources they need to navigate a bladder cancer diagnosis. Through patient support, awareness, and research, our vision is to create a world where bladder cancer is just a memory. While Bladder Cancer Canada strives to support Canadians in their diagnosis and journey, we hope that anyone listening from around the world can benefit from these discussions and know we support you too. As a reminder, this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not intended for medical advice. If you need medical information, please speak to your physician. For this episode, we invite John to share his journey. Thank you so much, John, for making the time to speak with Bladder Cancer Canada.
My pleasure to be here.
Great. I was hoping to start. Maybe you can tell us a little about yourself and your background.
Sure. I am 73 years old. My birthday was last week. It's a journey that had a lot of ebbs and flows to it in my career and in my life. I was born and raised in a little town called Saint-Eustache in Quebec, in a French-Canadian community. My parents immigrated to Canada just after World War II. They were from Poland. They were both concentration camp survivors and established themselves in Quebec around 1950, and very successful, business operations in Quebec, in Canada. And they raised 4 kids. I'm the eldest of 4. My brother and my sisters are still going strong. And we're all a pretty close-knit group, and we tend to enjoy life because our parents basically taught us to enjoy every day as best as we possibly can. So that's what we do. So educationally, I'm a professional engineer, electrical engineer out of Montreal. I have an MBA out of currently the Ivy School of Business in London, Ontario, graduated many, many years ago. In fact, I'm going to London, Ontario next week for my 50th homecoming.
Oh, congratulations.
So 50 years out of an MBA. Got out of school and joined Air Canada within a month of graduation. Spent close to 20 years at Air Canada. Left Air Canada, joined Canadian Pacific Railway. Spent 7 years at Canadian Pacific, both in Montreal as well as in beautiful downtown Calgary. Then left CP after about 7 years and ran an oil and gas company as a CEO in Calgary for about a year and a half. Then I did another career change and went into consulting, and then became a headhunter in executive search for about 12 years. But all through that career, whether it's Air Canada, CP, even the headhunting, I was always interested in giving back. In school, and when I did my MBA, I was a teaching assistant and did the occasional class, and I enjoyed that domain. So I started teaching while I was working at Air Canada at McGill. So I've been teaching off and on at McGill since 1985. So 40 years of teaching, sessional teachers. And when I retired from executive search, McGill said, wait a second, we can't lose you. So they hired me about 10 years ago. So I've been at McGill full-time since 2015. And I teach both at the undergraduate and the graduate level at McGill in supply chain and in aviation. I wonder why. And so I'm married, no kids. My wife and I are celebrating our 39th wedding anniversary this year. And she's a breast cancer survivor for 27 years now, 28 years. And I'm a bladder cancer survivor.
Wow. So a couple of survivors, and that must be a great support system that you have each been through something similar. Let me ask you, what were your first signs and symptoms, and what led you to seek medical attention and eventually discover that you had bladder cancer?
Well, I would very much like to say it was a deliberate discovery, but it wasn't. It really was one that has a story behind it. About 5 years ago, right at COVID, I was finding myself urinating more and more frequently. That it was probably every couple of hours I start to urinate. And I went to my GP, who got me to see a urologist and had me do a CT scan. And the CT scan came back, and the only thing that was noted on the CT scan was a lesion in my bladder, 1 centimeter, not to be concerned about. And the urologist came back and said, "Here's some pills for your urinary flow. Have a good day. Let me know if it doesn't work, or let me know how well it works, and we'll see you whenever you have another issue." So for 3 years, I took this urinary control pill for about 6 months, did nothing for me, stopped it. So I got used to every 2 hour urinary flow. About 2 years ago, in one episode, heavy blood and a urinary in one of my sessions, all my urinary sessions, and then I said, "This is not good." So I had a urologist in Montreal that I had developed a relationship with over the last 15 years. And I called him and I said, I've got an issue I think you should look at. Call me in. And immediately he said, I'm going to go for a cystoscopy, and went for another CT scan. And at the day I had my cystoscopy, he showed the scan. He said, "There's something there that shouldn't be there. Let's go have a look at it." And that was in November of 2023. So it was about 2 years ago. He went in and discovered 2 tumors. And he
Two.
said that they're 1 to 2 centimeters. They weren't lesions anymore. And I said, "Oh, this is not cool." And then I showed him the report I had 3 years earlier, and he was slightly, upset that the urologist at the time didn't take it any more seriously than just reading it and talking about a lesion. And he said that to me, that should have been an immediate sign for further either analysis and or TURBT. But he basically, when he did his cystoscopy, confirmed it. Uh, an interesting phenomenon. I'm not sure how relevant and how frequent this is, but my urologist likes to show me the tour. So when he was doing his cystoscopy, big TV screen behind
Yeah.
me,
Yeah.
4-inch TV screen, and he's looking at it. He said, "Here, John, let's have a look." So he gave me the tour, and here's your, here's your urethra, and here's your prostate, and here we go into the bladder, and we're going through the bladder, and all of a sudden, there it is, two of them side by side. He says, "Yep, that's got to go," and no biopsy, no nothing, and scheduled me for a TURBT 6 weeks later.
Wow.
And
And
then
so what was the final diagnosis?
it was carcinoma. It was TA1, non-muscle invasive bladder cancer,
Okay.
and stage 0, stage 1A. And he basically said, no treatment. He says, "We'll take it out,
Okay.
we'll get rid of it, and then we'll go and monitor you. So no BCG, no nothing after that."
Okay.
So I said, "Fine, that's great." So we were scheduling quarterly cystoscopies after that. And of quarterly cystoscopies, did 3 of them. Oh, you did 2 quarterlies, and then they moved to semi-annual. And then in the semi-annual one, lo and behold, in March of this year, another one. He said, "Oh, there's something again. There's something that's there again." And he showed me on the screen again. He said, "There they are, side by side. They're not where the old ones were. They're in another area across from the previous site." And he says, "TURBT." I said, "I know the drill." So about a month later, at beginning of April, TURBT, did a TURBT, 2 surgeons, 20 minutes into the surgery, and it wasn't a GA, it was a local anesthetic. So I was awake the whole time.
Okay.
And about 20 minutes later, one of the surgeons comes back and said, "I can't find anything. There's nothing there." I said, "Excuse me." I said, "I saw it. My urologist saw it." And she said, "Well, I spent 20 minutes looking for it. I can't find it." And she says, I'm butting you up. There's nothing I can do." So I said, "This is strange."
Very
So,
strange. Yeah.
so, so I got out of TURBT, and then I called my urologist the next day. I said, "By the way, your colleagues, did a TURBT. There's nothing there." He says, "Wait a second. You and I saw it." So I said, "Okay, we'll go for another cystoscopy." Had to wait 3 or 4 weeks, I think, before we could do another one. Went in there, and within 5 minutes, saw them again. And then he said, "Wait, before we go any further, I'm going to get the 2 surgeons who were there. I'm going to bring them in here, and I'm going to show them." So 2 minutes later, they both walk in, and he says, do you recognize this patient?" And they both said, "Yes, he's the guy that we did and didn't find anything." I says, "There it is on the screen. Can you see it?" They both said, "Oh my God, we missed it. And I said, okay, now what? He says, well, we'll have to go do another TURBT. I said, I think, let's talk about a plan B first before you put me to surgery again. Can we do a biopsy? And my urologist says, well, they're small enough that we're going to take them out. We're not going to bother with the biopsy. They're coming out. So no anesthetic, no nothing. Went in there, pulled them out, and it was a little bit of a trauma,
Sounds
but
like
he
it.
did it.
Oh my
He pulled it out,
goodness.
and came back about a month later from pathology, clear. So it was benign. So to me, so now I'm on the road to constant surveillance. So I'm
Okay.
back to quarterlies now. Next one's scheduled for November, I think, October, November, and back to quarterlies and then semi-annuals after that. So the odds of recurrence, my urologist says, are high. So that's why we're doing this. And our objective in the exercise is to get them in early, make sure we detect them as quickly as we can. So even though we saw the one in March and we couldn't find it after a while, it was there, but it was benign rather than malignant. So luckily, and he said, but you're on the track to keep going with this constant surveillance.
Right. So a watch and wait. And so your first two were malignant, and then the second two were benign, and
Correct.
now we're in a watch and wait.
Yep.
All right. And were you offered anything else as far as treatments, follow-up, just a watch and wait schedule?
Yep. That's it.
All right. Well, bladder cancer diagnosis can be physically and emotionally challenging experience. Could
Yep.
you describe some of the most significant challenges you faced during your bladder cancer diagnosis and the trials and tribulations of going through trying to have that removed?
Yeah, I think that when it rains, it pours, right? So the first indication that I had a medical issue was a bladder cancer, and the diagnosis and the TURBT exercise and a confirmation that it was malignant. And within a month after that, I had a heart issue that surfaced
Oh
that
no.
never had a heart problem before. I was sitting at home and I was watching television with my wife, and my heart started to race and race significantly.
Right.
And my blood pressure went through the roof. And my wife thought I was having a stroke because I couldn't talk, I couldn't do anything, and called 911. Within 5 minutes, 911 was there, and they had a heart rate of 170 with
Oh my goodness.
my normal heart rate's about 60.
Right.
So they stretchered me and put me in the ambulance and brought me to the nearest hospital. And I was constantly being monitored. Within a minute of getting to the hospital, the heart rate dropped to 80.
Yeah, of course.
It dropped. So then we wheeled me into ER. ER says, why is he here? And they said, well, here's a strip, man, 160, 170 for the last 15 or 20 minutes. So they brought me in, wired me up for 3 days, and then found out that I have atrial flutter
Okay.
and I have aortic valve stenosis. So blood thinners and arrhythmia pills
Okay.
for the rest of my life. And then about a month later, I had another incident where for some unknown reason, I had a I call a neurological event that I was sitting and then I couldn't stand and I couldn't talk.
Oh my
And,
goodness. That
and
sounds scary.
it's very scary. So my wife went nuts, again called 911. And they came over and they said they did the neurological test. It wasn't a stroke. And they said, well, we're gonna bring him in for a checkup. After 3 days at the Jewish General Hospital in Montreal, which I know quite well, they said, it was a virus, and here's antibiotics for 3 days. Go home and have a good time. Bladder cancer, heart problems, neurological. So talk about stress.
Yeah,
So
no
in the meantime,
kidding.
I'm teaching
Oh
what I'm
my
doing.
goodness. And you're still working through all of this.
Yeah. Well, as soon as I had bladder cancer, I diagnosed, but I had the cystoscopy done, and I told McGill, I said, I'm going in for TURBT at the end of January, so I'm going to take time off, 3 days before TURBT. Yeah, so I continued teaching, and end of January took 3 months off for TURBT and recovery and diagnosis and all that good thing. So the surgery was okay, was covered, and my heart issue was covered, so I didn't have to worry about it. And then when I had the neurological, I said, I'm going to take another month off. So I took, the first half of 2024, or 20, sorry, first half of 2024, I took off of work.
Right.
And McGill was very good, got insurance, got the whole thing covered, but the brain was kind of wired completely. So it was traumatizing for me, to start off with bladder cancer, which in itself was enough
Right.
to get the brain starting to think a little differently, and then compounded with a couple of other issues. By the time I got to June, July of 2024, I was pretty well a basket case.
Yeah,
But
no
then I went back
kidding.
to work. So I went back to work in the fall of 2024, and I've been at it since. I've not taken any time since then.
Well, that's so nice to hear that things have resolved and you haven't experienced any more issues. And just so that our listeners are clear, the heart issue and the neurological issue had nothing to do with the bladder cancer,
No,
correct?
nothing.
All right. I just wanted to make sure that we're
Yeah, no,
clear on that.
it was just, and I'd say it was, coincidental, or it was, a side issue, whatever. There was no treatment for bladder cancer, so there was no BCG, there was nothing else that they gave me except monitor, and it really was a function of the rest of my body saying, wait a second, here's the time for us to send you a message, and message received,
Message received, definitely, right?
message
I
received.
like how they told you to sit back and relax and wait for the neurological thing to pass when you can't even move anyways. So,
Can't move. You're sitting. You can't. And I couldn't talk. I couldn't. My wife says, and I said I couldn't talk, and I couldn't. My hands are okay. I couldn't move my feet. I couldn't talk, and it just was I just I would say blabbermouth, but it wasn't blab. I couldn't do anything.
right,
So
right.
it,
That
so
sounds
it,
absolutely scary. Oh my
very.
goodness. You must have been so scared. Well,
It
I'm
was.
glad that you have a wife and she cares enough about you to call 911 every time.
Yeah, and her going through breast cancer, I think she knows the mental impact of it. So so I was there with her during breast cancer. So we kind of understood the trauma and the healing process and the recovery and the monitoring process. She's
Right.
still being followed annually by her oncologist 27 years later. So she's still, every time she goes and schedule for a breast exam or a conversation, it's like the blood pressure goes up and nervousness steps in. So she knows exactly how I feel when I go to my cystoscopies and wait for results.
Yeah, definitely. And, having a good healthcare team is crucial. And I know that the role of the healthcare providers are crucial in the cancer journey. How would you describe your interactions with your medical team and what made those interactions positive or challenging?
Well, the initial initial examination of my bladder back 5 years ago, looking back, I said that was not a very pleasant experience. That first one where they missed it and didn't do anything to kind of delve a little further as to what that lesion was all about. I was disappointed when I found out. My urologist basically said, that was a mistake. So I said, so that's not good. But the Jewish general in Montreal, for me, has been there throughout my life, literally. So I've been a regular customer of the Jewish general for 20 some odd years. And I've had 3 or 4 surgeries with them over the years. No, the urology team at the Jewish was amazing. They really took care of explaining what was going to happen and how to go about doing it. The surgical team was great. The equipment, the nursing staff really empathized with me and understood the stress that I was under. I was not a happy camper, didn't know what I was going into. In fact, when I did my first surgery, my first TURBT, I was told I was going to go under general anesthetic, and I said, not my idea of a good time. So I had a conversation with the anesthesiologist before surgery, and he said, yeah, so we have a couple of options. Either I can put you out and we take you a few hours to recover, but it does have an impact if you're 70 or close to 70. It might have a residual impact on your cognitive behavior and your memory loss. So I said,
Interesting.
what's a plan B? And he said, we can give you, the local anesthetic. They'll give you an epidural. It'll freeze you from your chest down to your little tippy toes, so you won't feel a thing, but recovery will be within a couple of hours. And that's what they did. And sure enough, I was wide awake through the whole procedure and they took extremely good care of me through the whole process. So, even the catheter removal wasn't so bad.
Wow.
I was
Wow.
fearing, but no, they really took care, and they made sure that they explained everything, what they were going to be doing, and they gave me options, which was good. And from that perspective, the medical care was exemplary.
Well, it sounds like you had a wonderful team, and that anesthesiologist sounds like he was absolutely top notch to give you some additional options there.
Oh yeah, no, and my wife told me, she went through GA and breast cancer, and it took her a good 4 or 5 months to recover. And I went through a GA about 12 years ago for a neck surgery, and it does impact you. So I think that, as long as you have a conversation with the anesthesiologist and they give you the choices, it's important for you to understand the implications of the various anesthesiologists' actions, and for you to make sure you make
An
a
educated decision.
educated
Yes.
decision. Educated decision.
Well, you're very lucky to have your wife right by your side, and she's lucky to have you by her side. Because we know that coping with all of this can be overwhelming, and many patients experience fear and uncertainty when they get a bladder cancer diagnosis. What strategies or coping mechanisms did you find most helpful during your journey, and what advice do you have for others facing a bladder cancer diagnosis?
I think, people have been telling me not to do research on the internet. Like, don't believe the internet. Don't go and do social media. Don't go out there and believe everything you read, because you'll get contradictory evidence, contradictions. And yeah, but you gotta make sure you understand, the quality and the expertise that's behind those sites, and really talking about it. And the US site on BCAN, there was a messaging board on BCAN, I think primarily on BCAN, that I found very helpful, that I could read, and I was lurking for months. So I wasn't reading, I wasn't involved, I was lurking
Yep,
and
yep.
just reading, and just and spending an hour or two a day just reading the stories and reading the responses and seeing how responsive, both the medical community was, and patients were, in providing assurances or help or guidance in terms of, having to deal with the bladder cancer diagnosis. Bladder cancer, to me, it really was, I spent a lot of time trying to understand the cancer, and understand treatment, and understand diagnosis, and trying to, understand what is it that I can expect post the pathology report of my initial resection of the tumor. So I kind of expected, a follow-on treatment post surgery. When I
Yeah.
got the pathology report and it said TA1s and non-invasive, and I said, well, I might be able to get it. When I read it, I said, well, I might be able to get away with, probably a 10 session of BCG, because that's what people normally would have to go through. And I asked the urologist, and he said, no, I think, your tumor, the conditions, and the way the tumor was situated, and what he's seen thousands of them, of course. So he says, I would rather wait, and I would rather you tolerate cystoscopies well, and let's keep going on the cystoscopy. Let's keep searching for them on a regular basis, and let's nip them in the bud, and not wait for something to grow to a greater consequence. So I understood why he was doing what he was doing. It reassured me, and the fact that I was going through, this constant surveillance and scheduling quarterly cystoscopies really was the way to go. And it was confirmed by reading that, not everybody who's diagnosed with bladder cancer has to go through follow-on treatment. So I was looking at, BCG. I was looking at all other types of treatments that people were looking at in terms of clinical trials, and looking at ways in which they can, in fact, look at it. I was concerned about, a cystoscopy, with basically removing the bladder and saying, let's go back with a neo bladder, and let's, get rid of this altogether and not worry about it. And so I did bring it up with my urologist, and he says, well, let's not cross that bridge just yet. There's a bunch of things we have to cross before we get to that neo bladder. We're going to conserve it, as long as we can, and keep you as whole as you can. You'll just have to tolerate the surveillance. And as you tolerate the surveillance, the odds of it recurring are high. He said 70%. So we'll just keep looking at it and keep chopping away at it as we find it. And we'll try to keep, keep the cancer away as best as we can over your lifetime.
Yeah, there's a lot of excellent resources on Bladder Cancer Canada. I like how you use the word lurking.
Oh yeah, it really was. And once in a while I throw it. So I did one after about 3 months of lurking. I said, okay, I'll post my first message board, and I basically gave them the summary of my diagnosis, and I had about 20 responses, and
Wow.
they're saying, who was
Yeah,
who's your urology team? They're all saying we want more of this. So
right,
I said,
right,
yeah, I was very happy with the urology team. I think that that's the key. The key is the support you get and the help you get, and the dialogue that has to happen between you and the urology team, because it's, to me, that's made the journey more tolerable. It's made it a way for me to feel that I'm being looked after, that I'm not doing this journey by myself, with myself and my wife, that there is, a team behind me that would be there whenever I need them. Like if I wake up tomorrow and I have blood in my urine, I know exactly what I have to do.
right.
And it's something that, to me, I'm monitoring myself. I know what I'm looking for, and I understand the process. And I think, and the team, if I call them today, I'm in there tomorrow. So it's that they're that responsive to taking care of their patients and making sure that we get the care we need as quickly as we get it.
Well, we're very lucky in Canada. We've got a wonderful healthcare system and we've got wonderful physicians. And we've also got Bladder Cancer Canada, which is a wonderful resource. And it's good that you're kind of keeping up on your own health and being your own advocate. That is something that we've talked about in past episodes, is really education is power, and getting all that information that you can, but not off of those sites that are questionable online, right? So that's the nice thing about Bladder Cancer Canada, is that you don't have to question what is on the site and the validity of it. And there's so many people that have been through it that are willing to talk with you and talk to each other in those forums and things. Whether you want to lurk or you want to be a participant is completely up to you, but lots of great resources. So let me ask, how did you find Bladder Cancer Canada?
I've no, I found it to be a system. It's not just a website. It's not
Right.
just a message board. I call it an ecosystem that it allows people who have been diagnosed with bladder cancer and really are learning about, what's the journey like, and for people to share the experiences, and for people to be able to get opinions
Right.
and to get views about, this is what I went through, and this is what the end result, or this is the treatment I'm going through, and this is what I'm feeling. These are the impacts of the treatment. What have been the side effects? What are some of the ways in which we cope with the treatments? And so, to me, it made information pack and the forums really managed to keep my blood pressure down, and to kind of keep my brain from going nuts thinking about dreaming up all kinds of potential scenarios which have no foundation in reality.
Right.
But the brain sometimes tends to be quite imaginative and creates all kinds of scenarios that you need to quiet the brain down. It kind of helped me cool down my anxiety and trust, and develop a great sense of trust with my medical team. So
Right.
that when I asked the questions to the medical team, I said, "Oh yeah, that's what I read on Bladder Cancer Canada," and
Right.
that's what so they confirmed the validity of the information that was given, on the website and through the forums. That really helped me control my anxiety. Bladder Cancer Canada was, the go-to place for me. If I wanted to get, the only place I would go otherwise would be the US, with BCAN. The objective, my objective is looking at, understanding, what the recurrence rates are. And it's looking at, what is it that we have to do to keep the bladder there, and
Right.
to minimize further recurrence of bladder cancer or removal of the bladder altogether. So preservation of the bladder to me, is key. And I think that, those things that we're doing around research to ensure that we detect and that once we detect, we basically protect. And I think that that's how we should be looking at, further moving the bar when it comes to bladder cancer treatment.
Right. No, I completely agree. Although you're on a watch and wait schedule, you've done a ton of research to support your own knowledge and your own confidence and relieve those anxieties. How has your experience now influenced your outlook on life, your relationships, and your future goals?
You know, I think my first encounter with cancer, of course, was with my wife. And, I was the rock behind her. I think she was pretty devastated when she got the diagnosis and the treatment. I've seen the impact of cancer over 25 years, 28 years with my wife. And so when I got bladder cancer and the diagnosis, I said, okay, here we go. How do we deal with this one? And I didn't want my wife to get traumatized by my cancer. So I kept it pretty low key. And I'm a high-spirited person naturally. I didn't get down in the dumps, but I buried myself in research. I buried myself into understanding.
Right.
So, like, what caused bladder cancer? Okay, how did I get this? And of course, there's no answer.
Right.
There's no answer to that. So, I'm not a smoker, didn't work in a toxic environment. I've lived, yeah, a reasonable life, I think. And so I stayed away from all the danger signals of what bladder cancer's causes are. And so I said, just the luck of the draw, DNA or whatever it is that's basically got me at age 70 to get bladder cancer. And I said, I'm not going to let this get me down. There is hope. There's no end, there's no road here. The life expectancy of a person with bladder cancer is long. It's not short. It's not like months or even, a couple of years. It's long, as long as you get treated,
Yeah.
as long as you get followed.
Yes.
And, it's a function of the team, of the medical team, the urology team that you have working with you. So that your objective when you get the diagnosis is to say, I want a strong team. And I want a team to be there with me that when I need them, they're there. So whether it's, a psychologist or whether it's a GP or whether it's in neurology or whether it's, the nursing staff, I'm a very outgoing type of person. So when I go to the Jewish General and the receptionist basically has me as one of hundreds of patients she sees every day, and she schedules me for, I came out of my cystoscopy and they said, we're going to do a TURBT. And she says, I have no idea when. So go home and we'll call you. I said, when are you going to call me? She says, could take 2 weeks, could take a month before we call you for TURBT. I said, thank you very much. To me, taking charge is an important element of it. It's really, yes, you've been diagnosed. Yes, you've gone through the diagnosis side. You've gone through, you may have gone through TURBT, you may have gone through BCG, but that doesn't mean you sit back, relax, and let the system take over. You've got to really follow up, have a system that you trust, nurses you trust, receptionists you trust, the urologists, of course, that you trust. But don't be afraid to ask because they're there to make sure that they take the best care they can of you. And if you don't ask, you don't get. So
That's
to me,
wonderful advice.
it was really that type of exercise that really was important to me.
Right. No, that's wonderful. Wonderful advice. So, how do you see your role as a survivor?
Summer, I'm a survivor.
You're a
Trust me.
survivor.
I qualify myself with people, and I said I'm a bladder cancer survivor. You don't need BCG or you don't need other treatments to basically qualify you as a survivor. Once you've got that first notice that it's malignant and it's got to come out, to me, then you can proudly wear that label as a survivor, and you manage your care post survival. Yeah, but survivor means, and I don't mind the label. I really don't, and I consider myself a survivor.
Right.
And so that's why I'm very happy talking about it because to me, you know, surviving means a lot of things to a lot of different people. So people go through bladder removal after cancer diagnosis, they're survivors.
Yeah.
That's a special type of person that has to go through that process. And yes, a lot more TLC needed to make that person whole again. And I think that that's where, I consider myself a bladder cancer survivor at the other end of the spectrum.
Right.
I don't want to get to that other spectrum, that other end. I'll do whatever it takes to make sure that, the system does take care of me and I do the required, surveillance. I won't skip cystoscopies. I know what the impact of that is.
Yeah.
And when my urologist shows me a video, or shows me a lesion or a tumor in my bladder, I said, "So how are you going to handle this one?" And
Yeah.
I don't, so it's a conversation I have with a urologist rather than just let the urologist do his thing.
So being proactive instead of reactive. Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
very much so.
So, how do you see your role moving forward as a survivor in raising awareness about bladder cancer or providing support to others facing a similar diagnosis?
Oh, I think that, what I want to be able to do in all of this is to try to make sure that I make myself available to conversations such as this one. I find that, I'm looking for opportunities to figure out, is there a way for me to communicate my story? And it's a lightweight story. It's not a heavyweight story, but I want to keep it a lightweight story for now, or as long as I possibly can before we have to move to more difficult stages. And I'll keep doing what I have to do in order for me to make sure that I keep it at, the light end of the spectrum when it comes to bladder cancer. So to me, the messaging is very clear that, surveillance and quarterly cystoscopies and getting a strong urology team that is responsive to any anxiety, that's what you need. So it's really, talking to the medical community about my experience and, the false start I had and the pickup done by my current urology team shows to me, the weaknesses and the strengths of the system. It's not perfect.
Right.
And we have, and you're really in the hands of the urologists. The urologists basically are those individuals that call the shot. They're the gatekeepers. We just happen to be playing the puck along along the boards. They're the guys making the plays. And I think that, the story about that mistreatment or that poor handling is one that should be talked about. And I've talked to a number of my urologists now at the Jewish, and we were trying to figure out, how do we get that message across to take charge and not to leave it, not to become an active member. You
Right.
as a patient
Yeah.
to be very, very key in the conversation around both diagnosis as well as treatment. And I think that that's where we have to somehow, some way, create that level of knowledge and have people not be afraid to ask questions and to make sure that they do the follow-up that they should be doing. I've had other individuals with bladder cancer that had to wait 4 months for a TURBT
Oh my goodness.
because they just sat there and said, the system will take care of me. Didn't work. So I think there's a lot of things that I could do to kind of, spread the word however I can about what is it that, what have I learned from my journey, and how has my journey changed my outlook about treatment for bladder cancer, and how have I managed to keep my spirits up, my outlook on life positive, yet still be called a bladder cancer survivor.
Kudos to you for advocating for your own health. And I think that that's really important. And that's why we're here on the Bladder Cancer Canada podcast, is to share your story and to share your journey and how you got there and the pieces along the way to in order to kind of encourage other patients who are newly diagnosed to advocate for their own health and take control of maybe not the situation, but take control of their own health in that sense.
Yeah, and I think it's important that people understand that as much as you don't want to use the term too morbidly, but this bladder cancer, to me, is not an automatic death sentence.
Right.
You can manage this. You can manage this. You can you manage the treatment, you manage the follow-up, you manage the diagnosis side of it, you manage the treatment side of it. There's hundreds of millions of dollars are being invested in, in bladder cancer research, and there are new technologies and new approaches being developed. It was interesting. One of the side notes was the in the surgery that I did on a TURBT. Before I did the TURBT, I asked my urologist. I said, "You guys use a blue light technology to basically make sure you find what's going on in my bladder?"
Yeah.
And he said, "No." I said, "Why not?" He says, "Because we invented it, and we find it's got some strong points and it does and have weak points, but we use our eyes. We use our eyes and our hands. And to us, the blue light technology is fine, but it doesn't always work. It's really, in certain situations it does work. It's not a blanket approach that we use on our TURBT analysis. And I think that to me, that's, a urology team is tied to understanding research,
Yes.
understanding the evolution of treatment of bladder cancer. So I think I've stopped asking questions of my urology team about new and exciting developments in the world of bladder cancer detection or bladder cancer treatment, because these guys are at the forefront. So it's nice to hear. I was taken aback when the surgeon says, "No, we don't use it." I said, "Since when don't you guys use it? It's been used all over the world." He says,
Yeah.
"No, we did it. We tried it. We launched it. And we're saying now there's better ways of doing it." I said, "That's
Very
fine.
interesting.
Works
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Works for
Wonderful.
me."
Was there anything that you were hoping to talk about today that we didn't touch base on?
Yeah, the issue to me, one of the issues is really, what are the side effects of a cancer diagnosis, and whether it's breast cancer for my wife or myself or bladder cancer, there are certain things in your body and in your lifestyle and how your body's reacted to the bladder cancer diagnosis or treatment, however you want to talk about it, that cause you grief. So the one thing that's happened to me is sleep.
Okay.
And sleep to me, I had a quasi-religious relationship with sleep, that I would basically hit the bed at 11 p.m. at night, and at 11:05 I was done until 7 a.m. the next morning. And now sleep is difficult to come by.
Oh,
And it's the brain. I've been running around like crazy, doing all kinds of crazy things, and it's my brain still reacting to the bladder cancer diagnosis and the declaration I have bladder cancer.
right.
That my brain is on fire, that it's trying to deal with it subconsciously, and to try to make sense out of it, and to try to figure out what did I do wrong. And it does fire up the brain cells. And if you look at my brain at 3 o'clock in the morning, it's as bright as it's at 2 o'clock in the afternoon,
Wow.
because the brain cells are firing, neurons are firing to try to make sense out of the bladder cancer diagnosis. And there is no answer. There is no answer to that,
Right.
and so I've been trying somehow, some way, to basically calm the brain down and to say, "Relax, kiddo. There's nothing you could have done differently that would have stopped, this diagnosis from occurring, but it's tough." So so I've taken sleeping pills once in a while to try to get a half decent night's sleep, of course. But if there's a challenge left for me to deal with as I take this journey down as a survivor of bladder cancer, is there's still that challenge left to me to, to get the brain to quiet down and to allow me to get a good night's sleep, because I'm getting it fitfully, and, get 2 hours, wake up, I'm up for 2 hours and then go back to sleep again. So it's really not a contiguous 8 hours worth of sleep. And I know that as you age, sleep patterns go crazy. So could it be aging that's causing the sleep patterns to go nuts? Could be. But my simple mind of cause effect tells me bladder cancer has traumatized my brain. It's being treated, it's taken care of. So the rational side of my brain says, relax, kiddo, it's under control. The irrational side of my brain says, how the heck did I get this? And what did I do wrong? And let's go back and try to figure out where this thing happened and how it happened. And it's insoluble. So it does cause me some grief once in a while, but I'm working on it. I'm working on it.
Have you thought about seeking counseling, or were you offered any type of counseling through your cancer treatment team
For sleep,
for sleep, for dealing with your bladder cancer diagnosis and the emotions that come with that?
was I offered? No, no, I was not offered. I was
Okay.
not offered. No, I'm a chipper guy. I've got a head on my shoulders.
Yeah.
I teach. I have students in my class that depend on my lecturing capability. I got papers to mark, final exams to mark. So I keep myself very, very busy.
Yeah. Well, John, it was so nice to meet you and speak with you. And thank you so much for taking the time to speak to Bladder Cancer Canada on the podcast. And this episode, I'm sure, will help lots of patients who are either newly diagnosed or going through the journey themselves.
It's been a pleasure, Summer. Thank you very much.
If you or someone you know has been diagnosed with bladder cancer, Bladder Cancer Canada is here to help with support programs, informative resources, and educational sessions. Visit us at bladdercancercanada.org to access these resources and to share your story. Be sure to follow us on X, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. We will respond to messages sent on socials. If you are a bladder cancer patient or survivor and would like to share your story on the podcast, please contact us at info@bladdercancercanada.org.